on local targets in Syria and Iraq. They are going global.
George, we've known for months that they have an external attack branch, and we knew that it was planning an attack or a series of attacks outside of their region in Europe or the United States. It's clear, when all the facts are in, we're going to know, but it's clear to me now, these three attacks were all ISIS. They were all planned for months. They all have central command and control out of Syria. And that means they're going to be trying it here. Whether or not they can get through, it's a much harder target here.
Any sense of why it's happening now? Some chatter in France about how it was a response to President Hollande's decision to go in with more airstrikes in Syria.
No, I think this was something that they've been planning for months. They finally got it ready, and then they did it.
And, Martha, that gets to the question of what the United States does about it. We just heard Ben Rhodes say that we'll have to eliminate safe havens. But what we've seen with ISIS is they've spread, not only in Libya, not only in Syria, not only Iraq, but also in Afghanistan, where you just were.
I was in Afghanistan, and they have a training camp there. They put out graduation photos. The U.S. military is involved in going after them in Afghanistan as well. But the idea that we have knocked out safe havens, we haven't. Look at Mosul. That is the second largest city in Iraq, and ISIS still holds it, and they have held it for a year and a half. Look at Fallujah. They have held Fallujah 30 miles west of Baghdad for almost 2 years. So these safe havens continue for ISIS. It's very complicated with airstrikes because those are in populated areas. They don't want to kill civilians there. Targeting is very, very difficult.
So what can you do about this targeting problem? You need people on the ground, right?
Well, that would certainly help. That would certainly help target. You need intelligence on the ground. That is a real problem. The U.S. has stepped up airstrikes and has had some successes of late. But if you don't have intelligence on the ground, and think about Syria, I know the administration loves to talk about Iraq and progress there, but Syria, the idea that we've trained and equipped these rebel fighters, they've trained and equipped about 5 rebel fighters. We don't really have partners on the ground who can help us in any significant way in
Martha,
Syria.
We know the president met briefly this morning with Russian President Vladimir Putin. One of the big questions facing Russia right now after the downing of that airliner, will they now start to go against ISIS, not only the opponents of Assad?
I think they probably will. I think you'll see Russia step up these airstrikes. I think you will see France step up airstrikes, although they've been involved and carried out airstrikes. They haven't done very many of them. Also, if you look back to Jordan, Jordan stepped up airstrikes right after its pilot was killed earlier this year, but then they tapered off. You really have to keep your eye on this because most of the allies taper off, and we'll have to see what France does.
And, Brian, one of the chilling things here, no evidence yet of any real chatter before the attacks.
That's very troubling to U.S. law enforcement especially. They thought they could detect this kind of planning in advance. That didn't happen. There was no indication they knew this was coming.
Bottom line, Richard Clarke, ISIS now eclipsed al-Qaeda as the #1 terror threat in the world?
By far, George. ISIS is much more capable. There are more of them. They have more money. They have more discipline, more training. This is a much bigger threat than we ever faced from al-Qaeda.
Okay, Richard Clarke, Brian Ross, Martha Raddatz, thanks very much. Coming up, more on the terror threat here at home. Pierre Thomas has all